Hello. If you found this video tonight, maybe you needed a quiet moment. The day is over now. The world outside is slowing down. Before the story begins, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always strange to think about how many of us are awake together in the dark. Now get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let tonight's stories begin. I'm posting this because I can't find anything similar online, and I don't want to ask people around here. It's the kind of town where everyone knows which house you visit and why. If I start asking questions about an abandoned station, it'll turn into gossip by evening. There used to be a small station on the old Kumi line extension, about 20 minutes by bicycle from my apartment. It stopped operating before I was born. The rails are still there, rusted and swallowed by weeds, but the platform remains. A single bench, a cracked timetable board, no ticket gate, of course. I found it last autumn while trying to take a shortcut to the river. It was late September, when the air starts to cool, but the insects haven't given up yet. The sky was already darkening around 6 p.m. I pushed my bicycle up a narrow slope and suddenly saw the platform between the trees. The station sign was still standing. Shirakawa, White River. Except there isn't any river nearby, just irrigation canals for the fields. What caught my attention wasn't the station itself. It was the timetable. The board looked newer than everything else. The paper was clean, protected behind cloudy plastic. I stepped closer, thinking maybe someone from the town office had replaced it as a joke. The listed times were ordinary at first glance. 6:12, 7:03, 8:47. But there was only one column. No distinction between weekdays and weekends. No destination listed. Just times, spaced irregularly, from early morning until 11:58 p.m. The current time was 6:05 p.m. I remember checking my phone out of habit. No signal. That area is like that sometimes. I told myself it was just leftover equipment. Maybe a replacement board that was never installed somewhere else. Still, I stayed. At 6:12, nothing happened. No vibration in the rails. No wind shift. Just the sound of insects and distant traffic from the main road. I felt slightly foolish for expecting anything. When I came back the next day, the timetable had changed. The plastic cover was the same. The frame was the same. But the paper inside listed different times. 6:19, 7:10, 9:02. I'm sure of it because I'd taken a photo the previous evening. I compared them on my phone. They weren't the same. I considered that maybe I'd misread it. The numbers were small and the light had been dim. But the spacing was different too. The final time the day before had been 11:58 p.m. Now it was 11:43 p.m. I started visiting after work. It became routine. I'd stop by the convenience store, buy canned coffee, and cycle to the station before heading home. Every day, the timetable changed. The times always included the current hour, within 10 minutes or so of when I arrived. One evening, I decided to test something. The board listed 7:26 p.m. as the next time. It was 7:18. I sat on the bench and waited. At 7:26, I heard something. Not a train. Not exactly. It was more like a subtle pressure in the air, as if the space around the platform had tightened. The insects went quiet for a few seconds. My ears felt full, like when you're inside a tunnel. Then it passed. I looked at the rails. They were still. I told myself it was wind. After that, I started noticing details that bothered me. The station sign, Shirakawa, looked slightly faded each time I visited. Not dramatically. Just enough that I couldn't remember how bold the letters had been before. The bench seemed to shift a few centimeters left or right. I measured it once with my foot against a crack in the concrete. The next day, it wasn't aligned the same way. One Saturday, I arrived earlier than usual, around 5:40 p.m. The board listed 5:44 p.m. I didn't sit this time. I stood near the edge of the platform, looking down the track. At 5:44, the same pressure came, but stronger. The weeds along the rails bent inward, as if something large had passed through them at high speed. I didn't see anything solid, but I felt movement, a displacement. and for a moment I thought I saw windows. Just an impression. Rectangles of slightly darker air sliding past. The sensation lasted maybe 3 seconds. Afterward, the insects didn't resume. The silence stayed. I left quickly that day. When I got home, there was fine dust on my clothes, gray like old concrete. I don't remember brushing against anything. I didn't go back for a week. But curiosity is persistent. When I returned, the platform looked cleaner. The weeds along the rails were flattened in a long, straight line extending into the trees. The timetable listed only 3 times now. 6:03, 6:44, 7:15. It was 6:40. I should have left. Instead, I stayed until 6:44. This time, I saw it clearly. A shape moving along the tracks, transparent but defined. The outline of a train, older style, boxy, with squared windows. It made no sound. The rails didn't shake. Through the windows, there were silhouettes. People seated, all facing forward. As it passed the platform, one silhouette turned its head, not toward me, toward the timetable. The train continued into the trees and vanished. The flattened weeds slowly lifted back into place. I realized I had been holding my breath. I checked the board. The 7:15 time was gone. Only 6:03 remained. And beneath it, in smaller text that hadn't been there before, final departure. I looked at my phone. 6:40, 6 p.m. No signal. The sky seemed darker than it should have been. I stepped off the platform and onto the gravel beside the tracks. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself it was all perspective and light. The air felt denser near the rails. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, measured. I turned. The platform was empty, but the bench was no longer there. In its place stood a narrow ticket gate, the old-fashioned metal kind. It hadn't been there before. Beyond it, the station sign now looked new. I'm not sure this is worth posting, but it's been bothering me for months. It's not dramatic. Nothing visibly happened. At least not in a way I can prove. But I don't use the elevator in my building anymore. I moved into this apartment complex in Saitama 2 years ago. It's one of those concrete buildings from the late 80s, 5 floors, dull beige tiles, narrow balconies. Not old enough to be charming, not new enough to be comfortable. The kind of place where you can hear your neighbor sneeze if you're both in the kitchen. I live on the 5th floor. There's only one elevator. Small, with a cloudy mirror and a faint smell of dust and metal. It has buttons for floors 1 through 5. No basement. No rooftop access. Just 5 floors. The first time I noticed something strange was in January during a cold snap. I came home from work around 10 p.m. The lobby heater was off, and my breath fogged slightly. I pressed the call button. The elevator was already on the 5th floor. That wasn't unusual, but I had left for work at 7 a.m., and I was certain no one had been waiting when I left. I remember, because I'd been annoyed that I had to wait for it to come down from someone else's use. I assumed a neighbor had used it during the day. When the doors opened, the inside felt warmer than the lobby. Not by much, just noticeably. Like someone had been standing inside moments before. I stepped in and pressed 5. The doors closed. The elevator didn't move. I looked at the panel. The button for 5 was already lit. That confused me. I was on the 1st floor. Why would 5 be selected? Before I could process it, the elevator began to move upward. I told myself I must have pressed the button twice without realizing. Or someone on another floor had called it, and it was completing that request first. But it didn't stop on floors 2, 3, or 4. It went directly to 5. When the doors opened, the hallway lights flickered slightly. Just once. My apartment was at the end of the corridor. No one else was there. I didn't think much of it after that, until it happened again. This time, I was coming home earlier, around 6 p.m. A mother and her child were waiting in the lobby when I arrived. The child pressed the elevator button repeatedly, while the mother apologized. When the doors opened, the display showed it had come down from 5 again. The 3 of us stepped inside. The mother pressed 3. I pressed 5. The doors closed. The elevator moved. It passed 2. Passed 3. The mother frowned. Didn't I press 3? She asked quietly. The button for 3 was lit. We passed 4. The child started to say something, but the doors opened at 5. I stepped out automatically, confused. The mother called after me. Excuse me. Before I could turn around, the doors closed. I waited in the hallway, expecting to hear it descend. It didn't. The display above the door still read 5. After about 30 seconds, the doors opened again. The elevator was empty. No mother, no child. I felt a brief, sharp embarrassment, like I'd misunderstood something obvious. Maybe they had gotten off quickly, and I hadn't noticed. Maybe the elevator had malfunctioned and reset. I went down the stairs to the 3rd floor. There was no one in the hallway. I checked the lobby through the stairwell window. No one. I almost knocked on a random door to ask if a mother and child had just come up, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to sound unstable. For the next few weeks, I used the stairs. Then one night in February, I gave in. It was raining heavily, and I didn't feel like climbing 5 flights. The elevator was on the 1st floor this time. Doors closed. I stepped in, pressed 5. As the door slid shut, I noticed something I hadn't before. Above the panel, faintly etched into the metal frame, were small scratches. They looked random at first, but when I leaned closer, I saw they formed a shape. 2 vertical lines, then a 3rd, then a 4th, like tally marks, grouped in sets of 5. I counted 4 groups, 20 marks. They were shallow, almost invisible unless the light hit at a certain angle. The elevator began to move. It stopped at 2. No one had pressed 2. The doors opened to a dark hallway. The motion sensor lights hadn't activated yet. For a few seconds, it was just blackness beyond the threshold. I didn't step out. After a pause, the doors closed. We moved again. Stopped at 3. Again, darkness. No footsteps. No voices. Closed. Stopped at 4. This time, the hallway lights were on. I could see clearly that it was empty. Closed. Then, instead of continuing to 5, the elevator jolted slightly and went down. Back to 3. Then 2. Then 1. The doors opened to the lobby. No one was there. I was still inside, frozen, hand hovering near the buttons. The display above the door flickered. It showed 0. There is number 0 in this building. The doors began to close again without me pressing anything. Panic finally broke through my confusion, and I stepped out quickly into the lobby. The doors shut. I watched as the display changed from 0 to 5. The elevator ascended. I could hear it moving upward, cables humming faintly. It stopped. At 5. I didn't go back up right away. I stood there for several minutes, listening. Eventually, I took the stairs. When I reached my floor, the hallway felt colder than usual. My apartment door was exactly as I'd left it. The elevator doors were closed. The display above them read 5. Since then, I've noticed something else. Every few nights, usually past midnight, I hear the elevator moving. Up, down, up, down. It pauses on each floor for a few seconds, like it's letting someone on or off. Last week, I checked the metal frame again. There are more tally marks now. 5 full groups. 25. I don't know what they're counting. I've started wondering if the building ever had a basement that was sealed off. I can't find any record of it. The floor plans online only show 5 floors. Tonight, when I came home using the stairs, the elevator display read 5 as usual. But as I unlocked my door, I heard it arrive behind me. The soft slide of the doors opening. I didn't turn around. After a few seconds, I heard them close again. The display now says 4. When I was in elementary school, we were told not to answer the town speakers at night. It wasn't presented as a rule, exactly. More like a reminder slipped in during a safety assembly. If you hear announcements after dark, stay inside, the vice principal said, even if you think you recognize the voice. At the time, I thought it was about pranksters. I live in a small coastal town in Miyazaki. We have the usual disaster prevention speakers mounted on tall poles along the seawall and near the fishing port. Every evening at 5 p.m., they play a melody to signal the end of the day. You can hear it echo over the water. After living in Osaka for 8 years, I moved back last spring to take care of my mother. The house is old but sturdy, with sliding glass doors that rattle when the wind comes off the ocean. The first late-night broadcast happened in June. It was humid, the kind of night where your sheets feel damp. I woke up because the power had flickered. My fan had stopped. Then the chime played. Not the usual 5 p.m. melody. This one was shorter. Off-key, almost. I checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. There was a pause long enough that I thought it had malfunctioned. Then a voice came through the speaker near the seawall. It sounded like my mother. Come outside.
Clear. Calm.
Exactly her tone when she calls me for dinner. I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. My mother's room is across the hall. I could hear her faint snoring. The voice repeated, slightly distorted by the old system. Come outside. It's low tide. The ocean was about a 5-minute walk from our house. At low tide, the water pulls back far enough to expose dark rocks and tidal pools. When I was a kid, I used to go out at night with a flashlight to look for crabs. I told myself it was coincidence. The speakers sometimes distort voices. Maybe it just resembled her. Then it said my name, not loudly, just woven into the sentence. Come outside, Yuta. I didn't move. The broadcast cut off mid-syllable. The power returned a few seconds later. My fan resumed spinning. In the morning, I asked my mother if she'd gone outside during the night. She looked offended. At my age,
I didn't tell her about the voice.
that afternoon, I stopped by the local convenience store. I casually asked the clerk, a high school student, if the town ever did late-night announcements. He shook his head. Only for tsunamis or evacuations. And even then, it's the mayor's voice. Has there been anything recently?
No, he said.
It's been quiet. That word stuck with me. Quiet. 2 nights later, it happened again. 3:12 a.m. This time, I was awake before it started. I don't know why. My eyes opened a minute early, as if something had nudged me. The off-key chime.
Static.
Then my mother's voice again. It's safe now. Safe from what? I went to her room. She was asleep, facing the wall. The hallway felt colder than it should have in June. The voice continued. The others have already come. As it spoke, I heard something else beneath it. A faint, sloshing sound. Water moving over sand. But the tide schedule on my phone showed high tide at 3 a.m. The voice shifted slightly, losing some of its resemblance to my mother. Don't be the only one left. I turned off the breaker to the house. The lights cut out. The fan stopped, but the speaker outside continued. It wasn't connected to my electricity. The voice kept speaking, though I couldn't make out the words anymore. It sounded layered now, like multiple people speaking in unison. I went to the front window and parted the curtain just enough to see the street. The seawall is visible at the end of our road. There were figures walking toward it. At first, I thought they were shadows cast by the streetlights, but they moved independently, slowly, all heading in the same direction. I counted at least 10. Some were small, child-sized. Others hunched. None carried flashlights. No one spoke. They walked as if they knew exactly where they were going. The voice from the speaker softened. Almost everyone. I felt an overwhelming urge to open the door. Not curiosity. More like embarrassment. Like I was late to something important. My hand was on the lock before I realized it. Behind me, my mother's bedroom door slid open. Yuta, she mumbled. Why are you up? The spell, if that's what it was, broke instantly. The figures at the end of the road were gone. The speaker clicked off. Only the sound of waves remained. In the morning, there were wet footprints on the asphalt leading back from the seawall. They stopped in front of several houses, including ours, but none led up to the doors. I checked local records later that week. In 1960, before the seawall was built, a typhoon surge hit this area at night. According to an old newspaper scan, some residents went out to secure fishing boats when the tide briefly receded. The article didn't specify how many came back. Last night, the chime played again, 3:12 a.m. This time, it didn't use my mother's voice. It used mine. "Just one more," it said. And I realized the figures walking toward the seawall weren't heading there. They were coming back. My grandmother used to air out the futons every Sunday. She'd carry them to the engwa and drape them over the railing so they could sit in the sun. Even in winter, she insisted sunlight kept things from settling inside. I thought she meant dust mites. After she moved into a care facility last year, the house in Yamagata was left to me. It's a narrow, two-story wooden house at the edge of town, facing a small patch of bamboo forest. The kind of place where the floor creaks in predictable places. I only stay there occasionally, usually when I need quiet to work. The first time I noticed something was during the rainy season. I had laid out a futon in the tatami room upstairs. It used to be my mother's room. The sliding doors still have faint stickers from when she was a child. It was late, past midnight. Rain tapped steadily against the roof. As I was drifting off, I felt a slight shift beneath me. Not the usual settling of blankets, more like weight redistribution, as if someone had pressed a hand into the mattress near my feet and then lifted it away. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit faintly by the streetlight filtering through the curtains. Nothing looked out of place. I told myself it was my imagination adjusting to sleep. Then it happened again. A gentle depression near my ankles. Slow, deliberate. I sat up. The futon looked smooth. No visible indentations. I turned on the lamp and checked underneath it, half expecting to see a cat. The house is old. Sometimes strays sneak in. There was nothing. The next morning, I folded the futon carefully and leaned it against the wall. That's when I noticed something strange. The tatami beneath where my feet had been was slightly darker. Two faint oval shapes side by side, like damp footprints. But I hadn't stepped there barefoot, and the windows had been closed all night. I brushed it off as humidity. The following Sunday, I remembered my grandmother's habit. I carried the futon downstairs and hung it over the railing outside. The sky was clear, bright. The bamboo leaves rustled softly. As I stood there adjusting the corners, my neighbor, an elderly woman, called out from across the narrow road. "Good," she said. "It's been a while since that house aired them." "Aired what?" I asked. "The bedding," she replied. "They don't like the sun." I laughed awkwardly, assuming she meant mold. That night, I slept upstairs again. The air smelled fresher. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke to the sensation of pressure on my chest. Not heavy enough to hurt, just enough to be noticeable. I couldn't move. I know about sleep paralysis. I've experienced it once before in college, but this felt different. The pressure shifted. From my chest to beside me, the futon dipped slowly, as if someone had lain down next to me. The indentation was visible this time. The blanket wrinkled inward. I couldn't turn my head, but I could see the fabric tightening toward that empty space. My breathing sounded too loud in the room. The depression adjusted slightly, as though whatever was there was settling into a comfortable position. Then I felt warmth. Not imagined warmth. Actual body heat radiating through the blanket. Tears welled up, without warning. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't even panicked. I just felt accompanied. After a long time, the weight lifted. I could move again. I switched on the light. The futon was flat, except for one detail. On the pillow beside mine, there was a shallow indentation, the shape of a head. The next day, I asked my grandmother about the house. She was lucid that afternoon, staring out the window of her care facility. Did anyone ever stay in the upstairs room? I asked. She blinked slowly. That room, she murmured. We moved her down eventually. Moved who? She didn't answer directly. She couldn't get up on her own near the end. My grandmother continued. So we brought the bedding downstairs. It was easier. I didn't ask more. That evening, I searched through old family albums stored in the closet. Most photos were ordinary New Year gatherings, school ceremonies. But in one album, near the back, I found a picture of the upstairs tatami room. A futon laid out neatly, and beside it, another futon. Identical. I don't remember there ever being two. When I went upstairs that night, I froze in the doorway. Two futons were laid out on the tatami,
Side by side.
both neatly arranged. I was certain I had folded mine and put it away that morning. The curtains fluttered slightly, though the windows were closed. The room felt warmer than the rest of the house. Slowly, carefully, I stepped closer. The second futon wasn't new. The fabric was faded, the pillow slightly thinner, as if it had been used for years. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Then, very gently, the pillow on the second futon sank inward, just a little, as though someone had rested their head. I don't sleep upstairs anymore, but every Sunday, without fail, I wake up to find both futons hanging over the railing in the sun, side by side, and I live alone. In my town, we don't use the old tunnel anymore. It cuts through the small mountain between our neighborhood and the next district over. A new road was built 10 years ago. Wider, brighter, safer. The tunnel was sealed off with a metal barrier and a sign about falling rocks. When I was a kid, we used to dare each other to walk halfway through it at dusk. It's short, maybe 200 meters, slightly curved, so you can't see the exit from the entrance. Even in summer, the air inside feels cold and damp. Last month, I found the barrier open. I was out jogging in the evening, just before sunset. The sky was that faded orange that makes everything look flat. As I ran past the old entrance, I noticed the metal gate had been pushed aside. There was no construction equipment, no workers, just the dark mouth of the tunnel. Open. I slowed down. I don't know why I went in. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself it was still just a tunnel. The temperature dropped immediately. My footsteps echoed softly against the concrete walls. Water dripped somewhere deeper inside. About 10 meters in, I saw something that made me stop. There were mirrors attached to the walls. Cheap, rectangular mirrors. The kind you'd find in a bathroom. They were mounted at head height, spaced evenly along both sides of the tunnel. They hadn't been there before. I'm certain of it. I approached the first one. It reflected me clearly, sweaty, slightly out of breath, phone in hand. Behind me, the tunnel entrance glowed faintly with evening light. Everything normal. I moved to the next mirror. Same reflection. But in this one, the light from the entrance looked dimmer. I frowned and glanced back. The entrance seemed the same as before. When I looked into the third mirror, my reflection was closer to the glass than I actually was. I hadn't stepped forward, yet the reflected version of me was almost nose to nose with its own image. I stepped back instinctively. In the mirror, I stepped back a moment later. A delay, subtle but there. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I turned around. The tunnel entrance looked farther away. It shouldn't have. I had only walked a few steps inside. I took out my phone to use the flashlight. No signal, of course, but the light worked. As I moved deeper into the tunnel, each mirror showed something slightly different. In one, my posture was slouched. In another, my head tilted at an unnatural angle. In another, I wasn't holding my phone. I stopped in front of one that made my stomach drop. In its reflection, the tunnel behind me was empty. Not empty of detail, empty of exit. There was just darkness where the entrance should have been. I spun around. The entrance was still there, small but visible. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflected version of me was no longer looking at the glass. He was looking over his shoulder, at something behind him. My real body was facing forward. Slowly, very slowly, the reflection turned its head toward me and smiled.
I don't smile like that.
It was too wide, too deliberate. I staggered back, nearly slipping on the damp ground. The mirrors on both sides of the tunnel began to reflect movement, not in sync. In some, I was still standing calmly. In others, I was running. In one, I was lying face down on the concrete. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, the nearest mirror was inches from my face. I hadn't walked that close. My reflection stared back at me, expression neutral now. Then it raised its hand. I didn't. It pressed its palm against the glass from inside. The surface rippled slightly, like disturbed water. I felt pressure against my own palm. I looked down. My hand was lifted, pressed against cold concrete. Not glass. Concrete. I yanked it away. The reflection didn't. It kept its palm in place, pushing. The ripple in the mirror widened. Cracks spread outward from where its hand touched. One by one, the mirrors along the tunnel began to fracture. But they didn't shatter outward. They shattered inward, into the tunnel space inside the reflections. From the broken surfaces, I saw glimpses of other tunnels. Some darker, some flooded, some with shapes standing just out of sight. And in every single one, there was a version of me, all facing the glass, watching, waiting. I ran. I didn't care about slipping. I didn't care about the mirrors scraping my shoulder as I passed. The entrance felt impossibly far away. My breathing echoed too loudly, as if the tunnel were amplifying it. As I sprinted, I caught flashes in the corner of my eye. In the mirrors, the other versions of me were running too, but not toward their exits.
Toward the glass.
Arms outstretched, as if trying to reach through. I finally burst out into open air and collapsed on the gravel outside. The sky was fully dark. The metal barrier was back in place.
Locked.
There were no mirrors inside, just stained concrete walls stretching into shadow. I told myself it had been stress, dehydration, something explainable. But that night, when I stood in front of my bathroom mirror to wash my face, I noticed something. There was a faint crack in the glass, right at palm height. And when I lowered my hand from the sink, my reflection took just a little too long to follow. There's a rule in my apartment building that isn't written anywhere. Don't check the peephole after 1 a.m. I learned it from the tenant across the hall, a woman in her 30s who moved in around the same time I did. We'd nod politely when taking out trash, sometimes exchange small talk about delivery mix-ups. One night, about 6 months after I moved in, I ran into her by the mailboxes. She looked tired. "You work late?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Why?" She hesitated, then said, "If someone rings your doorbell after 1, just ignore it." I laughed lightly. "That happens." She didn't smile. "Just don't check," she said. "Especially not the peephole." I assumed she'd had trouble with drunk people pressing the wrong button. Our building is near a station. It wouldn't be unusual. For months, nothing happened. Then in February, during a stretch of freezing nights, my doorbell rang at 1:12 a.m. I was still awake, lying in bed scrolling through my phone. The sound cut through the apartment sharply. Not a long ring, just one press. I sat up, annoyed. Probably someone at the wrong door. I waited. Silence. Then, after about 30 seconds, it rang again. Longer this time. I got out of bed and walked quietly to the door. The hallway outside is always dim. Motion sensor lights turn on when someone walks past, and you can usually see the glow from under the door. There was no light, which meant no movement. I remembered what my neighbor had said.
Don't check.
But that only made me more curious. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. At first, I thought the hallway light was broken. All I saw was darkness. Not the usual grainy, distorted corridor view. Just black. I frowned and leaned closer, pressing my eye fully against the metal rim. Still black. Then slowly something shifted. The darkness wasn't empty. It was close. Too close. As if something was pressed directly against the other side of the peephole, blocking the view. I jerked back. My heart was pounding now, more from confusion than fear. If someone was standing that close, the motion sensor should have turned on. I bent down slightly to look at the gap beneath the door. No shadows. No feet. Nothing interrupting the faint light from the emergency exit sign at the end of the hall. The doorbell rang again.
Short. Sharp.
I swallowed and forced myself to look one more time. This time, I didn't press my eye fully against it. From a slight distance, I could see a thin crescent of the hallway around the edges. The center was still blocked, and then it moved, not away, sideways, like an ice sliding across the lens from the outside. I stumbled backward. The realization came slowly. Someone wasn't covering the peephole. They were looking back through it.
From the wrong side.
The doorbell began ringing repeatedly now. Not frantically, just steady, measured. Each press spaced exactly a few seconds apart. I grabbed my phone and opened the building's security camera app. Each floor has a camera pointed down the hallway. I selected my floor. The screen loaded. The hallway was empty. My door was visible from an angle. No one stood in front of it. The doorbell rang again. On the camera feed, nothing moved. Then I noticed something. The peephole on my door. From the camera's perspective, it was a small dark circle, and it looked wet, like condensation was forming around it from the inside. I glanced at my door. There was a faint ring of moisture around the peephole, as if someone had been breathing against it. From my side, the ringing stopped abruptly. Silence filled the apartment. I stood there for several minutes, not moving. Eventually, I checked the camera again. Still empty. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I knocked on my neighbor's door across the hall. No answer. I tried again that evening. Still nothing. By the third day, I asked the building manager about her. He looked puzzled. "There's no one in that unit," he said. "It's been vacant for months." "That's not possible," I insisted. "I've spoken to her." He shook his head and showed me the occupancy list. Her unit was marked empty. That night, at exactly 1:12 a.m., my doorbell rang again. I didn't move from my bed. It rang once,
Twice.
3 times, then stopped. A few seconds later, I heard something softer. A small click from my front door, like someone testing the handle. I forced myself to stay still. The handle didn't turn, but I heard a faint shift in the wood, as if weight was leaning against it. And then, very gently, 3 taps from the other side. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to let me know it was still there. I haven't checked the peephole again, but sometimes when I pass by the door during the day, I feel a strange pressure in my right eye, like something is pressing against it from the other side, waiting for me to look back. I worked the late shift at a small business hotel near a regional train station. Nothing fancy. 5 floors, thin carpets, identical rooms. Most of our guests are salespeople or construction workers who check in after dinner and leave before sunrise. After midnight, it's usually just me at the front desk. There's a rule in the manual about room 504. If a guest reports an issue with 504, relocate them immediately. Do not attempt to inspect the room alone. When I first started, I asked my manager about it. He shrugged. Old plumbing. Noise complaints. Easier to move them. Room 504 is at the end of the 5th floor hallway, last door on the right. I've walked past it many times during routine checks. It looks the same as every other room. Last month, around 2:40 a.m., the desk phone rang. The caller ID showed 504. I answered with the usual greeting. There was silence for a few seconds. Then a man's voice, low and strained. "There's someone in the bathroom." I glanced at the check-in screen. The registered guest was a middle-aged man who'd arrived around 10 p.m. alone. "I'm sorry," I said. "In the bathroom," he repeated. "They're standing behind the shower curtain." His voice didn't sound panicked, just confused, like he was describing a maintenance issue. "Did you lock your door, sir?" I asked. "Yes." "And you're alone in the room?" "Yes." In the background, I could hear the faint hum of the room's ventilation fan. Nothing else. "I'll move you to another room," I said quickly, remembering the manual. "Please come down to the front desk." There was a pause. "I can't." "Why not?" "They're between me and the door." The line went quiet. Not disconnected, just silent. I could still hear breathing. Not one set.
2.
Very close to the receiver. "Sir," I said. The call ended. I tried calling back. No answer. I stared at the security monitor behind the desk. It cycles through cameras in the lobby and each floor hallway. When it switched to the 5th floor, I leaned forward. The hallway was empty. Room 504's door was closed. No movement. I told myself the guest might be confused. Half asleep. Maybe the shower curtain had shifted. But the rule was clear. Relocate immediately. Do not inspect alone. I picked up the master key anyway.
I don't know why.
Maybe because I didn't want to look incompetent if it turned out to be nothing. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than usual. The fluorescent light flickered faintly. When the doors opened, the hallway was still. Thick carpet, identical doors, soft yellow lighting. As I walked toward 504, I noticed something strange. The air felt humid, like someone had just taken a hot shower. I stopped in front of the door, listened. Nothing. No voices. No television. I knocked gently. Front desk. I called. No response. I knocked again, louder. The door swung inward. It wasn't fully latched. Inside, the room lights were on. The bed was neatly made. The suitcase near the desk was closed. No signs of struggle. No sign of anyone at all. Sir? I called softly. No answer. I stepped inside. The bathroom door was closed. Light on underneath. And I could hear it. The shower running. Water hitting tile. Slow.
Steady.
My mouth felt dry. I approached the bathroom door and knocked. Sir? I'm coming in. The shower kept running. I pushed the door open. Steam rolled out immediately, fogging my glasses. The bathroom was small, sink, toilet, tub. The shower curtain was drawn fully shut. Water sprayed against the inside of it. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. No movement behind the curtain, just water. With shaking fingers, I reached out and pulled the curtain aside. The tub was empty. The shower head sprayed against bare tile. I exhaled sharply, almost laughing at myself. Then I noticed the mirror. The bathroom mirror above the sink was completely fogged over from steam, except for one clear patch in the center. Perfectly round, as if someone had pressed their face against it from the other side, from inside the mirror. And in that clear circle, faintly visible in the reflection, the bathroom door, and someone standing in the doorway. Behind me, I spun around. The doorway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the clear patch was gone, completely fogged over. The shower water abruptly shut off. The sudden silence rang in my ears. I backed out of the bathroom slowly. The hotel room felt different now, smaller. The bed was no longer neatly made. The sheets were pulled back slightly, like someone had just gotten up. And the suitcase near the desk was open, clothes scattered around it. I was sure it had been closed. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me flinch.
It was the front desk line.
Incoming call. From 504. I was standing inside 504. My hands were shaking as I answered. I didn't say the greeting this time. I just listened, breathing. 2 sets, one close to the receiver, the other farther away. Then the man's voice.
Calm.
Flat. They're behind you now. The bathroom door creaked softly. I didn't turn around. The line went dead. I don't remember leaving the room. The next thing I knew, I was back at the front desk, sitting in my chair. The security monitor cycled to the 5th floor. Room 504's door was closed. No sign anyone had entered or exited. In the morning, I checked the guest log. Room 504 was listed as vacant. No check-in the night before. No record of a call. The manager told me I must have been dreaming during my shift. But sometimes, when the phone rings after midnight, the caller ID shows 504. And I can hear the shower running before I even pick up. My family keeps a guest book in the entryway. It's an old habit from when my grandfather ran a minshuku out of our house in the mountains of Gifu. Hikers would stay overnight, eat my grandmother's cooking, and write short messages before leaving. Thank you for the warm meal. Beautiful stars. Things like that. The enclosed 20 years ago, but the book is still there on a small wooden table beside the shoe cabinet. No one writes in it anymore. It just sits open to the last filled page from 2004. I moved back last autumn after my parents relocated to Nagoya. I work remotely, so I thought the quiet would help me focus. For the first month, nothing unusual happened. Then one morning in November, I noticed the guest book was closed. I was certain I'd left it open. I remember brushing dust off the page a few days earlier. I assumed I had bumped it while vacuuming. When I opened it again, it fell naturally to the middle instead of the old final page. There was a new entry. The handwriting was small and careful. Stayed one night. Thank you for letting me rest. No date. No name. I stood in the Genkin for a long time, staring at it. No one had visited. The front door is heavy. It makes a distinct sound when opened. I would have heard it. I checked the windows. All locked. I told myself it had to be old. Maybe I'd never flipped through that section carefully before. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Our house is traditional, wooden beams, sliding doors, thin walls. Every sound carries. Wind in the trees. The refrigerator humming. The distant rush of the river. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the entryway. Not loud, just the subtle shift of weight on wood. I froze under my futon. The footsteps were slow, unhurried. They moved from the door toward the small table where the guest book sits. I held my breath. There was the faint sound of pages turning, one page at a time, then silence. In the morning, the guest book was open again, on a new page. Second night. It's colder than I expected. The handwriting matched the previous entry. I felt an unpleasant tightness in my chest. I checked the security camera my father had installed above the front door after a minor theft years ago. The footage from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. was corrupted. Just static. The rest of the night was clear. I didn't tell my parents. Instead, I decided to test something. Before going to bed the next evening, I placed a thin strip of clear tape along the edge of the guest book's cover and the table. If someone opened it, the tape would tear. I also sprinkled a bit of flour across the Genkin floor near the table. It felt ridiculous, but it calmed me. At 1:47 a.m., I woke to the same sound. Footsteps, this time closer to my room. My sliding door was shut, but I could see faint movement of shadow beneath it. The footsteps passed by, into the entryway, pages turning again. Slow, deliberate. I forced myself to get up. My legs felt weak as I slid my door open. The hallway was empty. The house was silent. I walked to the entryway. The tape was torn. The flower was undisturbed. Not a single footprint. The guest book lay open. Third night. Thank you for not interrupting. My hands began to shake. I flipped back to the previous entries. The ink looked fresh, slightly glossy under the light. I flipped further back. All the older entries, decades old, looked normal. But as I turned pages, I noticed something that made my skin prickle. Between some of the older entries, there were faint impressions, indentations in the paper, as if someone had written on pages that were later removed. Carefully, cleanly. I went back to the newest page. There was more writing now below the last line. I was worried you would come out tonight. A drop of something dark marked the margin. Not quite ink. Not quite water. I closed the book abruptly. That afternoon, I drove to the small local library. I asked the librarian if she remembered my grandparents' inn. She smiled nostalgically. Many travelers. Some stayed longer than they meant to. What does that mean? I asked. She hesitated. There was a man, she said finally, before you were born. He arrived without luggage. Stayed several nights. Your grandfather said he never saw him leave. I felt my throat tighten. Did he pay? She gave me a strange look. No one could remember his face clearly, she said. Even your grandfather. He said it was like trying to recall a dream. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the living room with the lights on, staring at the entryway. The house felt different after midnight.
heavier.
At 2:03 a.m., the front door handle turned slowly. The door did not open. It just trembled slightly, as if testing the lock. Then came the footsteps. From the door, across the wooden floor, into the entryway. The guest book opened by itself. I watched the pages lift and settle. A pen I had left beside it rolled gently toward the crease and began to move. The pen scratched across the paper, slow and steady. I could hear each stroke. When it finished, the pen fell still. The house returned to silence. I waited until dawn before approaching. On the page was a new entry. 4th night. I can stay longer if you'd like. Below it, in different handwriting, shakier, uneven, was another line. I recognized it immediately. It was mine. Please leave. I don't remember writing it. The page. When I was a child, my father told me never to open the storage room at the back of our house. It wasn't locked. There was no padlock, no warning sign. Just a sliding wooden door at the end of a narrow hallway, always closed. If you hear something from inside, he said once, almost casually, it's just the house settling. The house is over 80 years old, built by my great-grandfather in a small village in Maine. It sits at the edge of a cedar forest, far enough from other homes that nights feel absolute. I moved back last winter after my father was hospitalized. The house had been empty for several months. Cold air lingered in the beams. The tatami smelled faintly of dust. The storage room door was still there, still closed. For weeks, I ignored it. The first incident happened in January. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard a soft sliding sound from the hallway. Not loud. Wood against wood. I turned off the tap and listened. Silence. I stepped into the hallway. The storage room door looked the same as always, but the gap between the door and the frame was slightly wider, just a few millimeters. I told myself it was humidity, the wood expanding and shrinking with temperature changes. I pushed it gently closed. It slid easily. That night, I dreamed of the hallway. In the dream, the storage door was open. Inside was not a room, but another hallway, longer than ours, darker. When I woke up, I could still feel the cool air from it. The next morning, the door was open again. Not wide, just enough to see darkness beyond it. I felt an odd reluctance to look directly inside. Instead, I went outside and walked around the house to check the exterior wall.
There are no windows for that room.
No vents, just solid wood. That evening, I called my father at the hospital. Why didn't you want me opening the storage room? I asked lightly. There was a pause. Old things, he said. It's better not to disturb them. What kind of things? Family things. He sounded tired, so I didn't press further. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not in my room, in the hallway.
Slow.
Measured. The floorboards creak in specific places. I know the pattern. I grew up here. These footsteps didn't follow that pattern. They avoided the creaking spots, as if whoever was walking knew the house well. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. The handle didn't move. After a long minute, the footsteps continued, down the hallway, toward the storage room. There was the faint sound of the sliding door opening, then silence. In the morning, the hallway was empty. The storage door was fully open. I stood at the threshold. The room inside was small, maybe 3 tatami mats wide. Stacked boxes. Old furniture covered in sheets. A broken standing mirror in the corner. Completely ordinary. Sunlight from the hallway reached only a short distance in. The back of the room was dim. I stepped inside. The air was colder than the rest of the house. Not dramatically, just noticeably. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my skin prickle. The far wall of the storage room had a sliding door of its own. I had never seen it before. As a child, I remember helping my father carry boxes in and out. I don't remember a second door. It blended almost perfectly with the wall, the same aged wood. It was slightly open. Beyond it, darkness, deeper than the shadows in the room. I approached slowly. The temperature dropped with each step. When I reached the second doorway, I realized something was wrong. The space beyond it was too large. It should have opened to the exterior wall, but instead there was a corridor, narrow,
Wooden.
stretching into blackness. I felt a wave of dizziness. This was impossible. The house layout doesn't allow for this. I stepped back immediately. When I blinked, the second door was gone. Just a solid wall with old water stains. I stood there for a long time, breathing hard. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been a trick of light, my mind filling in shapes. That night, I pushed a heavy dresser in front of the storage room door. I wedged it tight. At 2:58 a.m., I woke to the sound of wood scraping against wood. The dresser was moving, slowly, as if pushed from the other side. The hallway light flickered on, motion sensor triggered. The scraping stopped. I didn't move from my futon. I couldn't. After a while, I heard the storage door slide open behind the dresser, wood bending slightly under pressure. Then footsteps. Again, avoiding the creaking boards. They stopped outside my door. This time, the handle turned, just a fraction, then released. The footsteps retreated, back down the hallway, and I heard something else. More footsteps, following, not in sync,
Softer.
as if multiple people were walking in that narrow space. In the morning, the dresser was back in its original position. The storage door was closed. I gathered my courage and opened it. The room looked normal, but the broken standing mirror in the corner had shifted. It was now angled toward the doorway, toward me. As I stepped inside, I saw my reflection,
Pale.
tired, and behind me, the second doorway stood open again. When I was in middle school, there was a rumor about the fourth platform at our local station. Our town only has 3 platforms, 2 active ones for regular trains, and 1 unused track overgrown with weeds. The station is small, just a ticket gate, a vending machine, and a waiting area with plastic chairs bolted to the floor. The rumor was simple. If you stayed on the platform after the last train and didn't leave when the lights dimmed, a 4th platform would appear. No one I knew claimed to have seen it. It was the kind of story passed around during club activities when everyone was half bored. I moved back to town this spring after almost 10 years in Tokyo. The station hasn't changed. Same cracked tiles. Same faded posters on the walls. The last train leaves at 11:42 p.m. One night in May, I missed it. I wasn't paying attention to the time. I'd been sitting on a bench, scrolling on my phone, enjoying the quiet. When I looked up, the departure board was blank. The station attendant had already locked the ticket gate. I was inside. There's a side exit near the bicycle parking area, but it's chained shut after hours. I'd have to wait until morning or call someone to let me out. I decided to sit and wait. Around midnight, the overhead lights dimmed automatically. Not fully off, just softer. The air felt cooler. I checked my phone. No signal. That's normal in the station sometimes. At 12:07 a.m., I heard a distant announcement over the speakers. The audio was distorted, too quiet to make out words. I assumed it was a system glitch. Then I noticed something across the tracks, where the unused 3rd platform should have been. There was light, not the harsh fluorescent kind the station uses.
Softer.
Warmer. I stood up slowly. The weeds that usually cover the 3rd track were gone. In their place was a clean stretch of rail, and beyond it, a platform I had never seen before. It looked newer than the rest of the station. The paint wasn't chipped. The tiles weren't cracked. There were people standing on it, perfectly spaced apart, facing forward. No one was talking. No one was looking at their phones. They just stood there, as if waiting for a train. I felt a strange embarrassment, like I had shown up at the wrong place. One of them turned their head slightly, just enough that I could see their profile. It was a woman, maybe in her 30s. Her expression was blank. Her eyes met mine across the tracks. Then she looked away. The announcement played again, clear this time, now arriving. There was no wind, no vibration, but the people on the 4th platform adjusted their posture simultaneously, straightened their backs, took a small step forward. A train slid into view. It made no sound. It didn't seem to move along the rails so much as appear, aligning itself with the platform. The doors opened. No chime. The people boarded in silence, one by one. When the last person stepped inside, I felt something behind me, a presence. I turned. The platform I was standing on looked longer, extending farther than it should. At the far end, past the usual staircase, there was another set of stairs leading down. I'm certain those stairs don't exist. I've used this station since childhood. At the base of those new stairs was a sign. I couldn't read it from where I stood, but I understood what it meant. Transfer. I looked back across the tracks. The train doors were still open, empty now, waiting. The woman who had looked at me earlier was standing inside, just beyond the threshold. She was facing outward, looking directly at me. Her expression had changed. Not angry, not welcoming, just expectant. I took a step back. The tiles beneath my feet felt slightly uneven, as if they had been laid recently. I heard footsteps behind me.
Soft.
Measured. I turned again. People were ascending the new staircase at the far end of my platform. Dozens of them, moving calmly. They walked past me without acknowledgement. None of them cast shadows. They crossed the tracks without stepping down, simply moving from my platform to the fourth as if there were no gap, and boarded the train. I realized then that the station lights on my side were dimming further. The fourth platform remained bright, inviting. A voice spoke from behind my right shoulder. "You're late." I didn't see anyone when I turned, but the words felt close to my ear. I looked at my phone. 12:17 a.m. The screen flickered. For a split second, it displayed a different time. 11:42 p.m. Missed departure. The train across the tracks began to close its doors.
Slowly.
I felt a sudden panic, not about missing it, but about being left alone on a platform that no longer felt like mine. Without thinking, I moved toward the edge. The gap between the platforms seemed narrower now. The fourth platform's tiles looked identical to mine, as if they had always matched. The woman inside the train tilted her head slightly. The doors were almost shut. I heard the voice again. Closer. "If you stay, you'll wait." Something brushed my hand.
Cold.
I looked down. A hand, not attached to any visible body, was resting lightly against my wrist, guiding me forward. I pulled away sharply. The contact vanished. The train doors sealed completely. The train did not move. It simply faded. The fourth platform dimmed. The people disappeared with it. The weeds returned to the third track. The unused rail looked rusted again. The station lights flickered back to normal brightness. The staircase at the end of my platform was gone. Just the usual exit sign and vending machine. My phone buzzed. Signal restored. 12:08 a.m. The time had gone backward. A security guard unlocked the gate from the outside around 12:15. He looked annoyed but not surprised to see me. "Last train's gone," he said. "You shouldn't linger." I nodded and stepped out into the parking lot. Before leaving, I glanced back at the tracks. There are only 3 platforms. I know that. I've counted. But sometimes, when I pass the station late at night, I see a warm light across the rails, and figures standing perfectly still, waiting for the transfer. If you're still awake, thank you for staying with me. Leave a comment so I know you made it this far. There will always be another story waiting in the dark. Until next time, let your mind grow quiet and let sleep find you. Good night.